Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The WBC champion Deontay "The Bronze Bomber" Wilder, he has ruled out signing with Eddie Hearn in any capacity, including for the Dazn streaming venture that the Matchroom promoter is helping to push in the United States. But the question is, does this matter? I know there's going to be some varied opinions on this one, but for me, it does in one sense, because it goes to a broader issue about the dearth of quality on the American heavyweight scene. So I'll come to that in more depth a bit later on. But first to Wilder's comments and a few thoughts. So talking to Fight Hub, so Wilder, he was asked about the reported $1 billion deal from Dazn, to which Wilder responded, "It's not a $1 billion deal." And then he sort of just trailed off saying it was over a period of years. He didn't really make any sort of conclusive statements there. But here's where the meat of his comments really begins. So Wilder stated, "I think he's going to have a very hard time signing American fighters because of the character of their actions dealing with me. They've done a lot of lying, manipulated people, they've contradicted themselves, and these are facts." And asked whether Wilder would sign with Eddie Hearn in this new deal, his response was, not surprisingly, "Not at all, not at all. I don't need to sign with no one. You know, I'm about to do my own thing soon anyway. I don't need to sign with anyone." So there's certainly a bit to unpack there, a few inflammatory statements, but I'll start with the first comment, so that it's not a $1 billion deal. And while his argument against it wasn't that strong, he sort of trailed off and that sort of thing, he didn't really back it up with anything, he may actually be right. I mean, it does remain to be seen what happens here. If the venture doesn't take off in America in the first couple of years like Eddie Hearn would like, then the owners of Dazn, which is Perform Group, they won't keep throwing good money after bad. And as I understand it, the general structure of this deal is sort of 16 US cards a year, a couple of monster cards in there, with another 16 cards from the UK. And it's got various options that sort of string this deal out to 8 years. So certain milestones will need to be hit. I mean, 8 years, $1 billion spent on shows, promoting boxing, etc. That is definitely best case scenario. And it's certainly an eye-grabbing headline to sort of sling to the fans, get people talking about this. And it has generated a lot of initial buzz. So, moving on though, the next comment from Wilder that Hearn will find it difficult to sign American fighters because of the way that Wilder's been treated. So I partly agree with this, but not because of the Wilder treatment bit. Because let's face it, it all hasn't been sweetness and light from the Wilder camp during these negotiations between Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua. So when he talks about lying, manipulation and contradictions, he's actually describing promoters in general, not just Eddie Hearn. So I think you've got to take that with a grain of salt. But I do agree with Wilder on the point that Hearn may actually find it hard to sign American fighters. And not just because of purely nationalistic reasons and loyalty to their current setups, etc. Because boxers ultimately, you know, if they haven't had good paydays or they're looking to maximize their sort of revenue in the sport, what they actually get paid, look after their families, they'll chase the money. But you actually have to consider, we've got this new service, 0 subscribers. We've only got a few details released and no price point for fans to mull over. Nothing for us to really talk about beyond the headline sort of grabbing announcement. And Eddie Hearn, he's actually said he's not expecting to release any major signing details until the end of June. So it's all out there at the moment, what is out there, that approaches are being made, etc. But at the same time, we've got a bit of an information vacuum. So what you saw, what happened with Eddie Hearn's offer to Adrian Broner when it was released publicly by Broner on social media, that was, as you saw, dissected 1,000 ways from Sunday. But maybe Eddie Hearn is going to actually have to leak some news, some good news of a big signing. Because right now, I'm sure there's a lot of fighters who are no doubt waiting and watching. Some guys won't want to declare that they're on board if it means that they're going to be out on an island by themselves. A big signing or two, you know, it needs to get the ball rolling. And that probably means Eddie Hearn, he's going to need to overpay for some really elite talent. Some guys with some real name recognition. I mean, he may have to overpay full stop. I mean, for some fighters with lesser profiles but good ability, the Broner deal, they're probably looking at that going, actually, that's pretty attractive. But Eddie Hearn, he's in a bit of a vex because he'll be well aware that signing up a load of guys with limited public appeal but good fighting ability, it's not going to pay the bills and get people sort of signing on. He needs some marquee signings. So he needs something to really get the ball rolling. But this is where I wanted to jump back to what Deontay Wilder said. So the heavyweight division, it's one of boxing's glamour divisions. Has been historically, there's always been a lot of money in the division, and public interest has generally been quite high in heavyweight boxing over the decades. So if you look at Wilder's statements, and it's a no from him, then who exactly is Eddie Hearn looking at then? I mean, the obvious next cab off the rank, maybe by default, is Jarrell Miller. And while Jarrell Miller is a bit of a legend in his own lunchbox, is he a big enough signing for Eddie Hearn to really push at heavyweight? I mean, arguably, Miller's profile is still relatively low outside of boxing fans, and even within boxing fans, he divides opinion over how good he really is. And when he's saying in live streams that if Anthony Joshua isn't next, I mean, guys like Trevor Bryan and BJ Flores can get that work, which what he said, that doesn't exactly inspire confidence. So, Jarrell Miller, we have actually seen him pushing away from Eddie Hearn recently in a public sense. Been calling him out over Hearn's statements that Joshua would be next, so that sort of started to come out in February. But in the same breath, when Miller admitted it wasn't realistic, he said he knew it was BS when he first said it. But Miller, he's a prize fighter. He will be after money, so I'm sure he's right now considering whatever offer he's had from Hearn. But perhaps he's going to be the best signing at heavyweight that Hearn can muster. I mean, I'm sure we'll all hear about how Jarrell Miller is a world beater again if he does sign on with a Dazn contract. Eddie Hearn will be pushing his name to us constantly. That's generally what he's been doing when he's been pushing Miller at the public for these couple of fights that Miller's been involved with on a co-promotional arrangement for Eddie Hearn's Matchroom USA. So he's not signed to Eddie Hearn just yet, but he has a working relationship with him, and his most recent fight was on the Danny Jacobs undercard. Okay, so if you actually take a step back from Miller though, outside of Miller, it's pretty slim pickings. I mean, you've got Bryant Jennings and Andy Ruiz Jr. over at Top Rank, where they've been under-promoted for some time, and they haven't really been that active. They've had long stretches of inactivity. I mean, you've also got Dominic Breazeale, arguably behind Miller or even behind Wilder, the second or at least third best American heavyweight on current form. I mean, some would say Bryant Jennings and Andy Ruiz would clean a Dominic Breazeale up, but you just don't know. They've been too inactive. So judging on today, Dominic Breazeale, he's definitely in the mix as a top 3 American heavyweight. And like Wilder, he's currently being advised by Al Haymon. So I see it hard for him signing on for a Dazn contract as well. I mean, I guess it depends what the offer is, but Al Haymon, he's with Dominic Breazeale, one of his clients. But Dominic Breazeale, if you were Eddie Hearn looking at him going, okay, this guy has taken a massive amount of punishment in his fights. He generally is not a hard guy to find. He takes a lot of shots to the head. I mean, is this guy going to be a really long-term option? So you also throw into the mix what we've got guys like Charles Martin, Gerald Washington. They're sort of floating around on the scene, but they're in the same sort of category as some of these other guys. You know, they're okay, but they don't have the best profile. And then there's a bunch of other guys that haven't really made much noise at all. They're sort of prospect, you know, fringe contender level sort of status. So Jarrell Miller, he does shape potentially as the #1 target after Wilder. And Miller, he's not really connected to anyone. He's not connected to Al Haymon. And Miller probably knows he's got a bit of leverage here. He'll know that if Wilder says no, that he's the next cab off the rank. And I'm sure he's using all this to negotiate a very good deal for himself. You've got to remember, he's never really had a proper big payday at heavyweight. He's been having all these sort of smaller paydays that are leading to a bigger payday. And I'll just move to something else quickly. When this Dazn deal was announced, we had Eddie Hearn being quoted as saying, championship fighters need to box 3 times a year. And we can do that for these guys. But more importantly, we can build from the ground the young fighters coming through. Young heavyweights need to box 8 times a year, not 3 or 4. So there's clearly some ambition, some plan to bring some heavyweights through. So potentially Hearn's plans may have to be, well, actually on the heavyweight side of the equation, he's going to have to bring some heavyweights through himself. Grow them, pick up the talent, hype them up, build them up over a period of time. It's probably going to be a work in progress, especially if Jarrell Miller is your #1 option. Not a big star at the moment, even though he does think he is. So the final thing that I did want to just touch on briefly was Wilder's comment, "I'm about to do my own thing soon anyway." What does that mean? I mean, your guess as to what that means is as good as mine. I mean, is he about to become a promoter in his own right? Is he going to try and mirror sort of Floyd Mayweather here? I mean, he's effectively promoting himself at the moment, and not exactly, I mean, he's doing an okay job. He's the only one generating any noise for himself. And I've always wondered, why has he got this current setup where he's got no one promoting him properly? Lou DiBella we have just promoting the events, but no one is out there pushing Deontay Wilder's barrow 24/7, 365. And consider this, and this won't, some people are not going to like this, but Deontay Wilder's WBC champion with 7 defenses under his belt. He's got the green belt, the most prestigious boxing belt in the game. And he's only got a moderate profile, and perhaps that's been kind. And his highest payday is just $2.1 million US. I mean, that speaks to being poorly handled, poorly promoted. But it's not just a recent thing. Oscar De La Hoya of Golden Boy, he had Wilder until 2014, and he failed to do really anything with him. And sure, Deontay Wilder, you might say, well, he's in line now for a big payday. But he's had to wait 41 fights to get there. And waiting that many fights to get to your first decent payday, and you're the champion, 7 defenses behind you, I mean, that's something I will never understand. Whoever's been working with Deontay Wilder hasn't done him justice here. He should have been a bigger star. He's got all the attributes, knockout punch, good personality, but, he's been languishing with these $1 million or $1.4, $1.5 million paydays. Would have helped if they did match him with guys we wanted to see him face, but that's by the by now. He had a decent step-up fight in Luis Ortiz. He won that in good fashion. He came back and looked pretty good in it. And now he's ready for an Anthony Joshua. Or at the very least, he's ready for whatever is thrown his way. But I'm interested in your thoughts on what exactly does "I'm going to do my own thing soon." What does that actually mean? And also, what did you make of his comments that he doesn't need Hearn, he doesn't need Hearn's money, doesn't need Dazn, and that American fighters will not be signing on the dotted line to fight on the streaming service, or at least he's going to find it hard to get them to sign? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.